it's Mrs. Nebeker, and today we are working on one-step equations. Your assignment for today is going to be on page 23, so that you can kind of have that open and look at the problems that we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing, similar problems to that page, so yeah, just follow along. Okay, one-step equations require one operation in order to solve for our variable. So, our variable is a letter. And it's something that represents how many, because we're not sure. Then we have operations. And the ones that we're going to be talking about today is multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Okay, so in order to solve an equation, you have to use these operations to get our variable isolated. You want the variable all by itself. That's what isolated means. So we want the variable alone. Okay, so one step means that you do one of these operations in order to get the variable by itself. The next thing you need to know is opposite. It's very important. Okay, each operation has an opposite. So the opposite of multiply is divide, and the opposite of add is subtract. These guys are opposite, which means that they undo. For example, if I had 5 bananas, and I said, okay, I want you to add 2 more bananas to that. We had a total now of 7 bananas. And then if I said, well, let's do the opposite of add. So we're going to subtract that same amount of 2, and that gets us right back to 5 bananas. So this add and this subtract of the same amount are opposites, and they undo what the other one did. So we added to get 7, and now we're doing the opposite to undo. So we subtracted to get 5, which is what we started with, our 5. Okay, that's the idea behind solving equations, is you're trying to do the opposite to undo and get the variable isolated and by itself. Okay, so we need to think about what's happening. Alright, so here's an example. This is what a one-step equation looks like. For example, 8 plus something equals 12. Now, some of you can do this very easily in your head. You know what number should go here to add to 8 to get to 12. But when we do more complicated problems, it's not going to be as easy, and you can't just see it right away. So we are going to go through the steps, even though they're one-steps, and we're going to write them down so we know how to write this down. So we're trying to figure out what's happening. Well, my 8 is positive. There's no sign right there, but we know it's a positive 8. So my 8 is positive, and it's adding to my x. Okay, but because it's positive, the opposite of add is subtract. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite, and we're going to subtract off 8 from one side and the other. Because what you do to one side, you must do to the other. Okay, when you subtract off the 8 and you do the opposite, you're keeping it equal. So equations are all about balance. They're like scales. So if I have 12 on this side and this much on that side, we have to keep our scales even. So what we do to one side, we always do to the other side. Okay, so I took 8 away here, which cancels them out. And then we have x equals, well, 12 minus 8 is 4. So I know that if we go back to the original problem, if I add 4 and 8, I will get 12. Okay, another way to look at this very same problem is if I had x plus 8. Here is a lot easier to see that what's happening to the x is we're adding 8, and that will give us 12. So to figure out what number this is, we do the opposite, and we undo. So this add, we do the opposite of add, which is subtract. What we do to one side of the equation, or the equal sign, we have to do to the other side of the equation. So if I subtract 8 to undo by my x and get this x isolated, I have to do the same thing to my 12. I'm going to subtract 8 here to keep it balanced. These guys cancel, and x equals 4. It's the same answer, it's just another way of looking at it. You can write your problem as the number plus a letter, or the letter plus the number, it doesn't matter either way. So let's do some more examples so we can get familiar with all of the different operations because we have a few more. We haven't even talked about multiplication or division yet. Alright, so here's another one. Okay, so if I have a problem that says -7 equals -2 plus y. So we're trying to figure out what's happening to the y so we can get it alone, all by itself and isolated. Okay, because we want to undo. So I look at this guy right here. Well, this is a -2. I know that there's a plus sign here, but this guy is still negative. So to get rid of him, to do the opposite and undo, I would need to add 2, because that gives me 0. If I subtracted, then I would have -4, which doesn't make my y any more alone. And we're trying to get the y all by itself. Okay, so we're going to add 2 on this side of the equation. It's an equation, so we have to balance. What we do on one side, we have to do to the other. So we're going to add 2 over here. These 2 cancel and leave just the y. That guy drops down. And then on this side, -7 plus 2 is -5. So y equals -5. So this one was a little bit more tricky to figure out by just looking at it, but -2 minus 5 will give us -7. So this is our answer. Let's do a few more. Okay, number 3. All right, so for this guy, let's do this problem. 25 equals 5g. Okay, so we have to first figure out what's happening. So what's happening between my number and my variable? Because we're trying to get this variable isolated and alone. So right now, when the number and the letter sit next to each other, it means that it's getting multiplied. So the opposite of multiplication is division. They undo. So we're going to divide. We're going to divide by drawing a fraction line here because fractions are fancy divisions. Sorry. Okay, so we're going to divide this side by 5, and what we do to one side, we must do to the other. So we're dividing this by 5. Okay, notice when we added and subtracted, we changed the sign to undo and to make nothing by the y. Here, we're dividing by the same number, which is kind of confusing, but if I were to change the sign, that would put a negative by my g, and then it changes it still, and we still have to undo. So we want to keep the signs the same when you multiply or divide. When you add and subtract, you want opposite signs. As you do more problems, you'll get more familiar with this idea. That feels very weird at first. So we divided by 5 on each side because my 5 is getting multiplied by my g, and we want to do the opposite. Those 5 cancel. Well, 25 divided by 5 is 5. So g is 5. Notice that I did show work, even though it's one step, and even though you may know that 5 times 5 is 25. It's okay. We still want to show all of our work so that we can be proficient when we come to the harder problems. All right, here's another example. If I had -4x equals -16, so we're trying to figure out what's happening with this variable and anything else. So on that each side of the equal sign, we don't really care about the other side. Okay, so this x is getting multiplied with this -4. So if it's getting multiplied by this -4, we have to do the opposite, which is divide. What we do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other side of the equation. We divide using fraction lines and not the division symbol again. Because look, if I draw this division symbol, isn't it a fraction? If I had 4/8, it looks like the fraction. The dots just stand for the numbers. It's a fraction sign. Anyways, okay, so we are going to divide each side by -4. When we divide the left-hand side by -4, is the same number on top of the same number on the bottom, make 1. So they are canceled off, leaving just our variable, which is x. On the right-hand side, -16 divided by -4 is a +4, because 2 negatives make a positive. So this is our answer. Okay, let's try another one. Ooh, what if we started off like this? y over 2 equals 8. Again, we have to figure out what's happening to our variable. Well, currently, our y is getting divided by 2. When it's in the fraction form, it means division. So the opposite of divide is multiply. So what we do to one side, we're going to multiply. We have to do to the other side. Multiply. We use parentheses in 8th grade math to show multiplication and not x's because here we have an x. And if we used an x for multiplication, it'd be really confusing as to which one was a variable and which one was multiply. So we use parentheses or dots. Those are the most common ones. Okay, when I multiplied the left-hand side by 2, it canceled out those 2's because I undid that operation. So now I have the y all by itself and isolated, which is what I want. And then 8 times 2 is 16. So if I were to plug this guy back in, 16 divided by 2 is 8. And again, you might have been able to see that at the very beginning. But when the problems get more complicated, we really want to see your work. And we want to see your work right now because it's good practice. One more. Okay, again, we have to look at what's happening with our variable. So right now our variable is getting divided because I have a fraction line, so that's how I know it's getting divided. When we have division, we have to do the opposite, or when we have anything, we have to do the opposite. The opposite of division is multiplication. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other side of our equation. So we multiply each side by 5. The 5's over here cancel out because basically we're saying 5 over 5, and this 5 over 5 is the same thing as 1. A number divided by itself is 1 because 5 goes into 5 one time. So this side is canceled because this 5 really goes on top, but it's just tricky to write it. And then I'm multiplying 5 by -3. And 5 times -3 is -15, which is what our answer is. Okay, so try your assignment. If you have questions, look at your answer key that's been given to you. If you have more questions, please talk to your teacher. Have a great day. Bye, guys.